Hello and welcome to another video. It's good to see you, well, the camera, but I can imagine you with my mind's eye. It's good to see you, and today we're going to talk about the top myths about learning guitar. Are they the top myths? We'll find out after these short announcements. Okay, so today we're talking about the top myths about learning guitar. Are they the top myths? Well, I don't know, kind of depends on anyone's viewpoint, but they're myths, which makes them great. So, let's dive right in to mythology. So, myth number one, start with light strings. Now, I don't really understand this one, to be fair, because you can end with light strings as well. It's like, so what are you starting? You're starting as the same as you're continuing. Well, I think this is a myth, basically because we're all very different. So, for someone with small hands, someone who's not very robust, it can be a good idea to start with light strings. But for others, it can be a good idea to start with heavier strings. And one thing springs to mind kind of instantly when I hear this, when I hear someone say this, and that's what Gary Moore said once in a documentary. And he said that he used to practice with kind of the heaviest strings around, and which was a pain, and every one of his friends was like, how can you play this thing? And only in a Northern Irish accent. And when he tried their guitars, he found that he could bend twice as far as they could. So, and he turned out quite all right in basically everyone's view. So if it was good enough for him, it's good enough for anyone. So don't worry about that. Start with what feels comfortable. If heavy strings are too heavy for you, go to lighter strings. Talk to someone at your local music store. That's a good thing, by the way, local music stores, because you can talk to the people who work there, at least if they're not jerks. Myth number two. Now, this relates directly to me, and it's something that's close to my heart. Start with an acoustic guitar. What a load of rubbish. It's a load of rubbish, I say. When my dad bought me a guitar, he bought me an electric guitar. And my dad used to work in the local music store, and my dad's also a drummer. My grandparents were thrilled at the idea of me starting to play guitar. And they said, we'll buy him an acoustic guitar. And my dad said, no way. He'll just end up quitting. Because basically my dad knew what I liked. And nothing that I liked could be played on an acoustic guitar. Well, you could play some stuff, but it wouldn't sound all that great. And that's basically, if you want to start playing guitar, you should start with the instrument that you're going to want to play. So if you're going to want to be an electric guitarist, I think you should start with an electric guitar, because you're closer to the mark already, and it's more fun that way. Okay, I didn't really do much my first 2 years, I only did this. But even that was great fun. Now, starting with acoustic guitar can be a great idea, but it's not necessarily such a great idea. It depends on the person. Same one as with the last myth about the strings. On to the next one. Start with a cheap guitar. Now this is also a load of rubbish. A load of all rubbish. It's all rubbish, I say. If you're on a tight budget and that's the only choice you have, of course, start on a cheap guitar. If budget is not an issue, You lucky bastard. Start with what appeals to you. Now, start on a cheap guitar. Who says that? Why do they say that? Because it doesn't bring you any closer to becoming a good guitar player or learning any faster. Why would you say that? And I honestly don't think that anyone thinks that you'll learn faster when you start on a cheap guitar. Not even just start on a cheap guitar. I think there's the underlying idea there that if you start on a cheap guitar, it won't be as much of a loss when you quit. But that's the idea. You're not going to quit. When you start, you want to start and go on. Now, a cheap guitar, there's a much bigger chance that it's absolutely crap. The frets can stick out here, it can be horribly out of tune, it can sound terrible, and all kinds of stuff might be wrong with it. It might have snakes living under the pickguard or whatever, I don't know. But the kind of problem with that is that if it's cheap and crap, it's much more likely that you'll stop because it feels terrible. Starting on a cheap guitar is by no means the way to go by default. It can be a good idea if you're on a budget. It can also be a good idea if you find something second-hand for cheap that's good or in usable condition. It can be a good idea if you find something new that's good, because there are some quite good things out there that are cheap. But in and of itself, start on a cheap guitar is absolutely nonsense. Next myth. Now you hear this in certain circles all the time. You need to learn to read music. No you don't. That's like saying that you need to learn to read when you learn to speak. And that's not true at all. What you do is you learn to speak, and then much later on you learn how to read and write. Now, same goes with music. You don't have to learn how to read music. It can be helpful. Especially down the line, but you have all kinds of other things that you can do. You can learn tab, which is way easier than reading music notation. It's also much more limiting in terms of the information that it can give you, but it's a good way to go. You can learn chord charts. They're very easy. And best of all, if you don't learn to read music notation, you're kind of forced to use your ears maybe a bit more. At least I was. I never learned to read music properly. I still don't read it properly, and that's a bad thing. But that forced me to learn by picking stuff up by ear, because when I was a young kid, tab was still not an option. Now it's an option, and I kind of damn tab even more than well, it's a big problem. I think people overuse it. It's an easy way to learn stuff, but you only learn this stuff and it doesn't activate your ears. But learning music notation, you don't have to do that. It's a good thing to know, and I warmly recommend that you do learn to read music, but you don't have to. Okay, start by learning chords. Another myth. We're all different. Now, if this is what you want to play, or this, especially if it's on a detuned guitar, won't make you kind of sit down and practice. So learning all this kind of that's great if you want to do that, and I urge everyone to learn chords at some point, but in the beginning I think you should aim for what you want to aim for. Now, there's basically no such thing as aiming too high too soon, because some people just don't care. I have a friend of mine who He's an insanely good guitar player who took, I think it was one guitar lesson, and just said, well, this is not my thing. Because the guitar teacher had him learning something like Kumbaya, my lord, or something like that. And all he wanted to do was shred. Shred! And that just goes to prove that we're all different. And he kind of jumped straight into the deep end and started learning shred. And I don't think he still knows more than a few basic chords. And he's a brilliant guitar player. Hello Janne, his name is Janne Nieminen, by the way. I'll put a link to his Instagram so you can go check out his insane shredding. And he does all that tapping stuff, he does every kind of whatever. And if someone had told him you need to learn chords before you can do anything else, and he had believed it, he would have stopped. I'm absolutely sure of it. If you want to do this kind of shreddy stuff that I just did, do that. If you want to learn how to make the guitar sound like a machine, do that. If you want to learn how to play AC/DC, then do that. If you want to learn Kumbaya, learn Kumbaya. That's a great thing. Now, any teacher, kind of worth the name teacher, should, in my view, ask the student what you want to play. Now, that doesn't mean that he has to dogmatically follow what the student wants, because the student won't know what's best, because the student is just starting out. But that there should be some kind of, okay, so I want to play Gary Moore, well then you need to learn, okay, this and that, and so on. And so, start by learning chords. What a load of rubbish. It's all rubbish. Now, the last one, and this is my favorite one in a way, because it's partly true and partly false. It's, do not copy others, you should develop a style of your own. Now, when you're learning, you should, of course, try to develop a style of your own kind of as soon as possible. But before you can learn a style of your own, you first need to kind of learn to play the instrument, at least on an intermediate level. And a part of learning that is copying what others have done before you. Now, when you want to develop a style of your own, you have to copy others. The kind of the thing to notice here is how to do it. It's not to learn every lick they play and then play those licks. It's to try to learn the whole package and learn many packages, so that you don't just copy one person, you copy stuff from here and there. So that means that all of this stuff melds together into something which will be you. And what you copy will be decided by what you're interested in, and that will kind of form you, and you in turn will also form the music coming out of you, which will hopefully become something that's unique to you as soon as possible. At some point, if you do this well enough and have diverse enough influences, it will. Now, if you only copy one or two people or three people, you'll end up sounding boring. If you only copy a few people from one genre, it's been done already. Even someone like Yngwie Malmsteen, who doesn't have very diverse influences in that he only had Hendrix, who he didn't learn to play like Hendrix too much. He had Ritchie Blackmore, and then he had Paganini, Bach, and all those guys. He didn't have any kind of things between there, but he molded those very different types of influences into something new. Now, and that's kind of the beauty of diversity. So, and the more diverse your influences are, the better the chances that you'll make something new and different, which is unique to you. And even if you only make something that's kind of genre-wise nothing new, I mean, Yngwie basically it didn't invent neoclassical shred, but he kind of made it what it is, at least. Even if you don't do that, and you kind of play rock and roll or whatever, or you play blues, but you can do it with your own touch. Think about Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck playing the blues doesn't really sound like anyone else playing the blues, but he has very diverse influences, and that's why I think that copying others is actually a very good thing. And you'll find this in many places where people say, steal as much as you can from others. Now, if you want to steal my licks, go ahead. Play them everywhere. That means someone might hear them, actually. Hello, Andrew. Now, so that's a myth, in my view. You should not copy others, you should develop your own style. It's a myth in a way, because you should develop your own style. But the first part of it is wrong. But, to be fair, it's most often said in the sense that when you're kind of old, or when you're a ready guitar player, or when you're past the intermediate stage, when you're an advanced player, you shouldn't be copying others anymore. By then you should have your own style. So that's kind of that. Anyway, those were my top myths of guitar playing, learning thing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Press that like button. Please subscribe. Feel free to comment if you have any more myths. Feel free to put them there, because that would be an interesting discussion. If you think I was wrong, say so, by all means. And yeah, well, hope to see you in another video. And now, I think I will copy someone.